welcome back to my channel, Taylor Talks Tales. Today I have an exciting and thrilling video for you guys today. So, I ended up binging a ton of thrillers. I read 18 thrillers in 11 days. Not part of any kind of thing, I just wanted to read as much as possible, and I've been on a thriller kick and decided, how many thrillers can I read in X amount of time? I like the number 11, so I went with 11. I wanted to do 20, didn't quite make it, but 18 thrillers in 11 days I still feel like is quite a bit. So you can say my January is off to a thrilling start. Anyway, so these are the 18 thrillers I read. I'm going to be ranking them from worst to best. And disclaimer, this is just my opinion. There may be some thrillers on here that you love that didn't really click with me, or some thrillers that I love on here that you weren't really a big fan of. It's totally fine. This is just sort of like my taste and sort of what I like in thrillers. And I tried to mix it up a little bit. Like there's a sci-fi thriller on here, there's a police procedural on here, there's some YA thrillers, there's, you know, all kinds of stuff. So I wanted to, you know, have a wide variety, and these are the 18 I picked. Most of them are from 2019 or 2018. There are a couple that came out earlier in the 2010s, and then there is one that came out in 2020, January 2020, and I read it. That was one of the last that I read. But I'm doing it in order of worst to best, so in order to keep this video from being way too long, let's go ahead and get started. Also, I will be doing individual reviews for some of the books, not all of them, but if you have one that you are interested in and would like me to do a full review or discussion, please let me know in the comments below, and look out for some of those reviews that'll be coming in the next probably week or two. Alright, so first book that I read was the worst book of the 18 that I read is The 10th Girl by Sarah Faring. This book was such a disappointment. Oh my goodness gracious. I had been really anticipating this. This was actually one of my more anticipated reads, and I think one of the reasons why I'm totally willing to give it 1 out of 5 stars is it just broke my heart. This should have been an easy 5 out of 5 star read for me, because it just, a gothic psychological thriller that's set in Patagonia area of Argentina. It's at the very tip of the continent, and it's like very icy and isolated and at a boarding school, so everything should have worked out. But this book, it would have been a 3 out of 5 star for me had the ending not been terrible. Not only was it bad, it ruined the entire book for me. It's very polarizing. Maybe some people might enjoy it. I did not. It ruined the book for me. So unfortunate. I'll go more into detail in a review on this, but just know that there were just a lot of elements of this book. There was like some weird racism going on. There was just a lot of things that didn't add up. There were just weird things going on. Essentially, this book follows a person who goes down to this boarding school in Argentina to escape some conflict at home and war and all of that, an uprising, political uprising, and there's a missing girl. There's supposed to be 10 girls at this boarding school. The 10th girl's missing. Follow up from there. Should have been cool, but it's not. 1 out of 5 star. Broke my heart. Ugh, so sad. Really want to like that one. Next one, I have a 1.5 to 2 star. I still haven't quite decided. I know that I gave it 2 out of 5 star in Goodreads. This one was also very disappointing for me, and this is The Furies by Katie Lowe. So this is marketed as like fans of The Craft would like this. Or I also heard some people say if you like A Secret History, you might like this. And I'm like, okay, The Secret History and The Craft. 2 things I really enjoy. That didn't quite work out with this book. So this book, basically, it takes place in the 90s in this small little coastal town in England. And it follows these 4 girls. They become friends, and they get into the occult and witchcraft and this like secret society. They're at this boarding school. Everything should have worked for me with this book. It has a lot of elements that I really enjoy, and I think it didn't know what it wanted to be, and the writing was kind of messy, and everything was all over the place, and you know, unfortunately just wasn't for me. It didn't live up to the hype, and it was just a disappointing read. In the end, I just kind of was like, okay, I'm glad that I was done with this. It's a little bit better than The 10th Girl, because it didn't make me want to throw the book out the window, but it was still very disappointing and lackluster, so. Furies. Alright, next one is Wicked River by Jenny Milchman, sorry. Funny enough, I thought this was a bone on the cover when I originally saw it, and it's a wedding dress, which makes a lot more sense, and my eyes just don't work, apparently. So this book follows a married couple. They have been dating for a few years, and then they got engaged and then married, and then after their marriage, they go on a honeymoon in the Adirondacks, and they're canoeing, and it was supposed to be this pretty exciting story because things are going wrong, and they meet this survivalist guy, and things escalate from there, and it's almost supposed to be sort of like a Deliverance story, and it was not Deliverance. If I wanted, I definitely would recommend you read Deliverance, or there's some other thriller type survival stories out there that I would choose over this one. I gave it 2 out of 5 stars just because there was a point of view in this and a storyline that I felt like didn't need to be in there. The beginning was really slow, the writing was super repetitive, and it was not what I wanted it to be, and I was very disappointed because I love survival fiction and man against nature, woman against nature, and the elements, and unfortunately this just was not that great. I could recommend a bunch of other survival thrillers over this one, so 2 out of 5 star. Next one is a 2.5 out of 5 star, and that's Scared Little Rabbits by V. Geiger. This came out towards the very end of 2019. I picked it up not knowing anything about it. I don't think too many people have talked about it or reviewed it. So this takes place, there's this, teenage girl, and she goes to this, it's not necessarily a boarding school, it kind of is a boarding school, but it's just like this very fancy school, for the 3-week program where she's super techie and she's super into like programming and software development and all of that. And so she thinks this will be really good to have on her resume. She's a little bit on the shy side, but she's kind of looking for this fresh start. And she meets this guy who's really invested in this game called Instalove, which is basically this app where you like make friends or crushes and all this stuff, like something that teenagers would really like. And then it goes from there, and there's a mystery element where someone disappears, and it's like, wait, what happened? The problem is, this book, the mystery, so the event of, wait, somebody disappeared, what's going on, somebody murdered, that kind of thing, doesn't happen until like after 250 pages, if I remember correctly, of a 350-page book. So all of it before was just leading up to this point, and for the vast majority of it, it reads more like a contemporary romance, which is fine. I have nothing against contemporary romances, but this I feel like was marketed, and the thriller aspect just did not kick in until too late, and then at that point I just didn't really care. And there are also like some mean girl aspects going on, and I feel like this would have been a stronger book, because it's really neat to have girls who are into programming and into software development and all of that. So I'm like, yay, STEM girls, but I feel like this book was missed potential, and there were just too many issues with it. So fortunately, 2.5, because I'm being kind of friendly, being nice. Originally I just gave it 2 out of 5, but I do feel like this book had potential, just really missed it, and was not good as a mystery or thriller. Alright, next one is also probably a 2.5 maybe. And this is An Anonymous Girl by Greer Hendricks and Sarah Pekkanen. I know this one is a very popular thriller. A lot of people really love this book and have been raving about it. I missed why. I guess I can see why some people would like it. For me, though, the twist and the dynamic of some of the characters in the story, I didn't like it. I just felt like, oh, okay, I kind of saw it coming, and then when it came, I was just like, eh. And I found it to be kind of boring, and then I just started trying to skim towards the end. I'm like, I just really don't care, which isn't a shame because it sounded really interesting. It's set up as the main character is a makeup artist, and she ends up getting involved in this study, the psychological study about morality and like what would you do and how would you handle this situation, and it just goes from there. And it's a very psych-focused book, and I thought that would be really cool, but it just, again, I feel like this is probably missed potential. I think this could have gone in a different direction, and it didn't, and that was kind of, it just wasn't my cup of tea. Next one, this is the first 3-star read, and this was No Exit by Taylor Adams, which Cool name, by the way, Taylor. So this one, so it takes place at a rest stop that is in the Colorado Rockies during this blizzard. So the main character, she gets a call that her mother is dying of pancreatic cancer, is going into surgery, and it's around Christmas time, and she's like, oh, well, I better get to my mom. So she hops in her little sedan and then is driving there, to Utah from Colorado to see if she can see her mom one last time. She ends up getting snowed in at a rest stop, and things start to escalate when she discovers there's a little girl locked in the back of this van, and she realizes that somebody there at the rest stop has this girl kidnapped, and goes from there. So this book, unfortunately, so it's a page turner, which is good, and I actually liked the ending, but I feel like with this book there was still also missed potential. For me personally, I tend not to like it when thrillers or even stories rely on characters having just sheer dumb luck, like they succeed just because they got lucky. And I feel like in this book there are a lot of dumb decisions that were made, not just by the protagonist but by the antagonist as well. And I was kind of hoping it was going to be more of a mystery, like figuring out who it was, as opposed to in the book it's actually revealed much earlier who the villain is. And I kind of was hoping for more of a mystery aspect, because it just, once you find out who it is, it's like, okay, then it becomes a survival story, which is cool, but then there were so many dumb decisions being made that it just kind of took away from my enjoyment a little bit. But it still wasn't, I mean, I read through the whole thing very quickly, so it succeeded at that, so, good job to the story, but it was a 3 out of 5 star for me, especially since it was pretty hyped up. I felt like it could have been a little bit better. Alright, next one. This is my first of 2 books by this author. This was the second one that I read, but the first one on this list because it's not as good as the other one that will be higher up. And that's Karen Slaughter's The Good Daughter. So this book, it follows a lawyer 28 years before she had been through this very traumatic event where her mother had died. Something happened to her sister, and it all stemmed from her father, who was also a lawyer. He was a defense attorney. And it was just a very violent act that kind of shaped who she was in the story. And then it takes place, pretty much it starts off, she has that very violent moment, and then it's 28 years later, and then there's a school shooting, and then it's figuring out like what happened with the school shooting. Is this girl who committed the school shooting innocent, guilty, what's going on with it, and then just how that and her past ties in together, and it has to do with sisters and family and all of that, and it's good, but it wasn't as good as Pretty Girls, which is the other Karen Slaughter book that I read, because this one kind of dragged on a bit. I felt like there could have been some pages that could have been snipped. I felt like there was, it just, at parts, I felt almost like, okay, I get it, and then there's some repetition and everything. The story was still good, and like I liked the ending, and I felt like it was, a solid book, but I'm only giving a 3.5 out of 5 star just because it at times bored me a little. I also do want to warn my viewers, this has the most graphic rape scene that I've ever read in a book, in terms of like, maybe not necessarily graphic, but just like the way it's told. It's in the last third of the book, and it's like, whoa. Like for me, it was like shocking, and I read tons of horror, I read and watch tons of horror and all of that, and that's like horror level violence in this book. In that one scene in particular, the way described just made me like, oh, cringe. I had to read a little fluffy book after I read this book just to kind of cleanse myself a little bit, because it was like not what I was not expecting that. So, trigger warning for that. But it's still definitely worth the read. So 3.5 out of 5 star. I might have liked it a little bit better had I not just read Karen Slaughter's other book. Alright, next we're on Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware. I'm not going to talk too much about this because I already have my review up. This was the book that sparked my thriller binge of January of 2020. 3.75 out of 5, almost a 4-star book. Pretty solidly written. I liked the atmosphere and the characters. I just felt like there was some missed potential, and I didn't really care for the ending and thought there were some predictable bits, but, still an enjoyable read. Next one is Rachel Kane's Still House Lake. This is a 4 out of 5 star read. This follows a woman and her 2 children. She was originally married to a man named Melvin, who turns out was this serial killer, like a pretty messed up serial killer who killed 12 women in their garage. And Gina, the main woman, she was put on trial because everyone thought that she was an accomplice to these murders and that she was helping her husband, because they're like, how did you not know that he was killing women in your own garage? And so she ends up getting acquitted, but she takes her 2 kids and she's on the run because there are these stalkers and these awful people who blame her and want to kill her and send her death threats and rape threats and all this, and it's, you know, very difficult. So they change their names and they make their life at Stillhouse Lake. Things are going pretty well until there's a body discovered in the lake. And then another one, and then it looks like, is Gwen killing everyone? Or Gina / Gwen, because she goes by a couple different names. And this is very solid. It's very short. It's like less than 300 pages. You fly through this. It's very quick. The reason why it's a 4 out of 5 star for me is, I think, mainly compared to some of the other thrillers on this list, it's not quite as memorable as some of those. I feel like it's kind of more of a popcorny type thriller, which is totally fine. Like, it's very enjoyable. I definitely want to pick up the rest of the books in the series because this is the first book in a series. But I just felt like it was, you know, just sort of your standard run-of-the-mill thriller at times. But it's still very enjoyable, so definitely check it out. Next book I have is The Chain, which this is also a 4 out of 5 star read. I actually feel like this book would make a really good movie or miniseries. This pretty much follows a mother whose daughter gets abducted, and then she gets a phone call saying that, you know, you have a certain amount of time to give us money, and you have to kidnap another child and hold the child ransom if you ever want to see your daughter again. And it's this like really crazy hostage and abduction and kidnapping and money, and you're trying to figure out what's going on, and it's very tech heavy, and you're trying to figure out, like, you know, how far is this mom gonna go, and how far back does this, and how big is this thing, and it's very, very interesting. I definitely feel like it would work really well as a thriller movie. I gave it 4 out of 5 star just because, like, the concept's really cool. There were some over-the-top moments, I feel like. Some of the characters weren't quite as fleshed out as I would have liked. And, you know, for the most part, the writing's fine, but it had a couple moments of, I'd say, weak writing, but it was still very enjoyable. Also another popcorn thriller, so definitely recommend check it out. I do find it very fascinating to see how far parents will go for their kids, and, you know, how far you would go for a loved one, and figuring out, like, where does this start? Where's the source of all this? And the tech part was interesting too. Alright, next one's also a 4 out of 5 star, and that's My Lovely Wife by Samantha Downing. This has actually been making the rounds on BookTube lately. I enjoyed this one a lot. I'm going to give this a 4.25 out of 5 star. It is, it's marketed as Dexter meets Mr. and Mrs. Smith, because this is a domestic thriller. I tend not to read purely domestic thrillers. I tend to read other types of thrillers, but I enjoyed this one quite a bit. I actually would recommend this probably for people who don't really like gore at all, because it's really not very gory. It's more of a psychological thriller / figuring out, like, the relationship between the husband and the wife and the family dynamics, because pretty much in this book follows the husband, who's actually never named, but he has an alter ego named Tobias, who's deaf and goes out to attract women. He's actually not deaf, but he pretends to be deaf. And then his wife Millicent, and their relationship, and the fact of, like, they kill to spark up their relationship, and I think that's very interesting, and it really follows how their kids are impacted by it. I'm giving it a 4.25 out of 5 star because it is very interesting, but I felt like there were parts that were a little bit slow, and I felt like the ending was a bit rushed, but overall it was very intriguing and I enjoyed it. And also, creepy eye and the knife. Alright, next one. This is also 4.25 out of 5 star, and this is Jennifer McMahon's The Invited. This is like my 4th Jennifer McMahon book that I've read, I haven't read The Winter People, but I read like Promise Not to Tell and a few other of her older books, and enjoyed them quite a bit. She tends to combine supernatural elements with her thrillers. I know some people don't like that. For me, I thought that was totally fine. I kind of liked it. So this book follows a husband and wife. They decide that they want to move out to the country in Vermont and build their own house and kind of live a more rural homestead type life. And they are both teachers. Main character Helen, she is a history teacher, and I thought that was very cool. And it just goes from there. And there's also another character named Olive. Part of the story is told from her perspective. She's 14. Her mother disappeared, went off with, everyone thinks she went off with a man. And she had told her daughter, Olive, that there was like some buried treasure by this woman who had been hung as a witch named Hattie Breckenridge, who was hung on the property of the newlywed couple who are, you know, they're building. And so it's very interesting. There's a lot of history to it. I found it really very awesome. Like, I just really liked it a lot. I took off a little bit because I just think that the whole premise of two people building a house solely based off of like watching YouTube videos and a little bit of construction like experience, but not much. I mean, these are two one's a history teacher and one's a science teacher, and they're like, we're gonna go off into the woods and build our own house. I just felt that, just for whatever reason, I'm like, ghosts, sure, I can believe in the ghosts in this story. These two characters building this house, I don't know, with no help, I felt like was a little far-fetched, so I took some points off of that. And there's like a couple things in here that like made it not a perfect book, but I did not guess there's a twist in it / a whodunit. I did not guess it, and that is awesome because most of the time I'm pretty good at guessing things just because this is like a genre I really like and enjoy. So so I did like the, you know, being surprised by that, which is awesome. All right, there's a few more left. All right. Next one is Karen Slaughter's Pretty Girls, which I love the color scheme of this cover. So, Pretty Girls, I read this before I read The Good Daughter, and Pretty Girls is just so good. I gave it a 4.5 out of 5 star book. 4.5 out of 5 stars. It was gripping, it's brutal, it's violent, I mean, the violence in this is borderline a horror story. In fact, really, I could see this being like borderline horror, more so than most of the other books in here, except for maybe Invited because of the ghost element to it. But this was so good. It took me a little while to get into it at the beginning, which is also why I docked a 0.5 star. But once you get into it, boom. It's just a solid, just things are happening, and it just takes off, and it really explores family and how the loss of a sibling can impact the whole family dynamic. It's very twisted, and I really liked it. I can definitely see why people don't like it. It's a very polarizing book with some of the violence in it, but I liked it. I thought it was really solid, and this is the book that put Karen Slaughter on my radar. And in this you follow two sisters who had lost a sister like years and years before. She just disappeared and was never found, and then another girl many years later disappears in a very similar fashion, and so it brings up a lot of what's going on, and it just, it's a wild ride. Check it out, you'll enjoy it, I'm pretty sure, unless, again, there's a lot of trigger warnings in that book, so just be careful. No going into it, there's violence, sexual assault, all that. It's pretty graphic in times, so, but it's good, it's worth it. Alright, next one we have is The Family Upstairs by Lisa Jewell. You'll recognize this from one of my book hauls. I really enjoyed this book a lot. This is a 4.5 out of 5 star read. It pretty much follows a girl who had just turned 25 years old, so a woman, and she inherits this house, and she investigates the house and tries to figure out like what happened, who she is, who her parents were, her family, that kind of thing. And it's told from multiple perspectives, and at first you're trying to figure out what's going on, and then the perspectives will eventually come together, and it paints this picture of what happened 25 years before, what led to the events, and why was, because the main character, she was found as a baby, surrounded by 3 dead bodies who would, look like they had committed like ritual sacrifice, suicide, something like that. And I thought it was really good. The twist. So it's not like this big reveal at the end necessarily, but there's a couple twists and turns throughout it, and the characters are well done. The writing's really good, and it's just a solid book. I definitely, found myself wanting to keep reading and figuring out what was going on. So it's not as like, one of those books where it's just like boom, 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 where like, oh, whoa, whoa, whoa. It's more just like, oh, this is just a really well done book. I took off a half star just because there's like one element that I can't go into it without spoiling that I kind of could have done without. But other than that, it was very good. Well done. Creepy, and just tackles abuse in a very interesting way. Alright, 3 more. We're almost done. Next one is The Whisper Man by Alex North. So this book follows a father and son. They've recently moved to a small town after the death of the wife and mother in their family, and they were just grieving, and they just could not handle living in this house anymore. So they moved to this new house that's kind of a creepy house. There's like some weird stuff going on. Just in time for a little boy to disappear and be found dead, and it brings up this old case called from the Whisper Man, where this guy who used to whisper to bring children to him and then would kill them, that happened in a small town. And it's like, is he back? Did he have an accomplice? What's going on? And just sort of figuring that out. So it's part police procedural, part following this father and his son, because his son starts hearing whispers and goes from there. And this is the first out of the 5 out of 5 star reads because I really enjoyed this a lot. It explores grief, it explores family relationships, and there's a character in here who's in recovery and trying to prove himself, and there's a couple twists and turns that I thought were really cool, and there's some interesting imagery, and I really enjoyed this a lot. I definitely recommend not knowing too much about it going in, so I won't say anything more. Just know it's a 5 out of 5 star read. Very enjoyable. It just may be slightly slow for some people at the beginning, but stick with it. Alright, next one. This is the book that was published in 2020. Just came out and I already read it. I ended up buying a copy just because I didn't want to wait at the library anymore. And this is Long Bright River by Liz Moore. So this book, it's a heavy book. And there's a lot of emotional moments that are going to be happening in it. Pretty much it follows a woman and her sister. The woman, she is a police officer in a sort of rundown area of Philadelphia. It's an older part of town. It's a poorer part of town, and it's impacted by... Sorry about that, battery died. So it's an older part of Philadelphia. It's run down. It's impacted by the opioids and heroin, and it's pretty much her trying to track down her missing sister, because her sister's been missing for a month, and her sister is a prostitute who's also addicted to heroin, and there are some bodies that are popping up, mostly of women who were prostitutes or somehow involved with drugs. And the first part of it, so I feel like this is a 5 out of 5 star read for me, but go into it knowing it's not necessarily one of those page-turner popcorn thrillers. In fact, the first part of the book really focuses more on the relationship between the two sisters and how they ended up becoming the way they were, because both sisters were but like their mother had died of an overdose, their father was also involved in drugs, and then he was out of the picture. They were raised by their grandmother, who wasn't really the friendliest, nicest woman, and it just kind of follows their story. And then the mystery is very solid, and I feel like this book is very real feeling. Like, I really feel like the main character is a real person, and her struggles are very real, and this town is really vividly described, and you have this sense of place, and the end is very satisfying with like the whodunit kind of thing. But just know it's a little bit of a slower paced novel at the beginning, and then it does pick up, but it's, at heart it's really about relationships and how awful drugs are. So definitely check it out though. I really, really enjoyed this a lot. It's gonna stick with me. Alright, the last two. So we have The Kind Worth Killing by Peter Swanson. 5 out of 5 star read for me. I feel like this is for people who are into the super traditional thrillers. This is a very good one. In fact, I liked this better than like Gone Girl, in fact, or some of those like really big well-known thrillers that kind of have that sort of feel to it. I don't want to spoil anything for you guys, because I think going into this book not knowing a whole lot about it is very, very good. So Kind of Worth Killing, it follows a man and a woman. They meet in an airport bar, and after talking and getting to know each other a little bit, they play this truth, or basically this game where they only tell the truth and nothing but the truth, and it comes out that the man, his wife has been cheating on him, and she's kind of, you know, this lying, cheating person, and he wants to, like, he's like, well, I'm really hurt by this, do I divorce her? But she's gonna get a lot of the money because he's very rich. And the woman, Lily, she suggests, why don't you kill her? Why don't I help you kill her? And it goes from there. And it's just a wild ride. Like, there's definitely like at least like 3 or 4 like major twists and turns and just big reveals and all this stuff going on in this book. So if you're looking for something like twisty and just gets in your head, and there's, you know, a little bit of violence and just all of that, I definitely recommend this. This was awesome. I will definitely be rereading it again. I really liked the main character, Lily, even though she, you know, I don't want to spoil too much, but basically she's not necessarily supposed to be the most sympathetic character, but the way it's written, you're kind of rooting for her. I liked her a lot. She's very memorable, so definitely check this one out. Alright, last but not least, out of all 18, this is the one I was like just blown away by. I didn't really know much about it going into it. I just know that I picked it up because it sounded very interesting, and that's Blake Crouch's Recursion, which has that cool holographic cover. This book was phenomenal. I blew through it practically in one sitting. I just stopped to like get food and take a few breaks, but I really just could not put this down. It is so well done. It is a sci-fi thriller, and pretty much you follow 2 main characters. So you have Barry and you have Helena, and it starts off in 2 different timelines. So you have Barry's timeline, which is in 2018, and you have Helena's timeline, which is in 2008. And with Barry, he is trying to solve, or basically it starts out, he's trying to convince someone not to commit suicide, because there's this disorder called false memory syndrome, or FMS, that starts cropping up in New York City and elsewhere, where people start having a full set of memories of things that never happened, like they've lived a completely different other life, and they're very vivid. And unfortunately, a lot of people start committing suicide because for some of them, their other life was much better. The woman he's trying to convince not to jump from the ledge had a had a husband and a child who never actually existed, and so she's like, what's going on? And a lot of people just couldn't take it, so it skyrockets the suicide rate. And then after that, it's him trying to figure out what exactly is going on. And then in Helena's timeline, she has a mother who's suffering from Alzheimer's, and it's getting a lot worse, and so she's put her life's work, she's a scientist, and she puts her life into figuring out how to preserve memories and how to, for Alzheimer's patients and for other people. So she's very interested into memories and, brain chemistry and psychology and all of that. And so it starts off with that, and at some point the 2 timelines come together, and then it is so good. It talks just in depth about memories and what memories mean to us, and then there's time travel, and there's, it's so much going on, and it's so good. I loved it. It stuck with me. This is a book I really want to talk to people about. I'm definitely going to be doing a full-on book review for it. And then I may do like a spoilery section because there's definitely some stuff that's going on. There's even a little bit of romance in it, and there's just nothing I would cut out of this book and nothing I would really change about this book. I just really liked it a lot. And I've read part of Dark Matter, which is another Blake Crouch book, and I read the first book in the Pines series. I need to get back into it because I did enjoy those. And then with Dark Matter, I actually had to put it back, or send it back to the library, so I didn't get a chance to finish it. I already can tell this is a better book than Dark Matter, in my opinion, even though I didn't finish Dark Matter, so maybe it is, but at least from the beginning, like, this pretty much, after a couple chapters, you're into it, and you're figuring out what's going on, and it's going to be a perfect book club book. It's going to be a perfect buddy read book. It's going to be a perfect book to just, talk about and make you think about memories and who you are without your memories, or if you have a full set of false memories, what's real, what's not. It's so good. I loved it a lot. It's it's entertaining and just great. And somebody told me that they might potentially make a series out of this or a movie out of this, which would be interesting. Just they would have to not screw it up. That's always like my fear, is that they're gonna mess things up. Anyway, so Recursion, Blake Crouch, go check it out. Out of all of these, this is my favorite one. All right, so, oops, sorry about that. So out of, all of these books, these are kind of the ranking of them. Again, I'm not saying these are like the best thrillers out there. These are just, I read 18 thrillers just for fun. These are the ones that I enjoyed, and then there's some that were not. I'm still going to be reading some more throughout the rest of the month. I just wanted to get this, this video out there. And again, if you have any of these books that you want me to do a full-on review for, I'm definitely going to be doing a full-on review for the 5-star reads, and then for the 1 and 2-star reads, just because I feel like I have a lot to say about those, as opposed to sometimes the 3-star reads, it's sort of almost hard to talk about because it's sort of like they're just very like blah, like I didn't like it, I didn't dislike it, it just but anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. I'm so sorry that was really long. There are a lot of books to get through. And if you have any thriller suggestions for me, please let me know. And if you've read any of these, let me know what you thought about them. Please like, comment, rate, subscribe, and I will talk to you guys later. Bye.